Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Cherrill Spencer. I've been a member of this humanist community for about 6.5 years, and I've been a member of WILPF, as we pronounce Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, because it's too long to keep saying that. We say WILPF. I've been a member of WILPF for about 5 years. And Herman asked me to come tell you all about WILPF, and that's what I'm going to do today with the help of materials over here. The title of my talk is Women's Power to Stop War. And I'm a member of the Peninsula Palo Alto Branch of WILPF. Several of my colleagues are here to assist me. They have collaborated with me on the research that led to the panels over here and my talk, and they also take part in the activities I will be describing. So Stephanie here on the front is going to raise her hand so you can see. So Stephanie, Judy here, and we're expecting one more, our one gentleman member who's possibly lost. So they will help me in answering questions because they've been members of WILPF much longer than I have. So many thanks to them. So let's look at the vision and mission of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. It's a vision that started in 1915, 103 years ago, when our organization was founded. And it's been going ever since. It envisions a world free from violence and armed conflict, in which human rights are protected and women and men are equally empowered and involved in positions of leadership at the local, national and international levels. Our international group particularly works on this issue of leadership in countries at war, for example in Syria and Yemen. So our mission, that was the vision, our mission is to end and prevent war, ensure that women are represented at all levels in the peace-building process. We wish to defend the human rights of women and men and promote social, economic and political justice. A very big mission. So how do we do that? So we have aims and principles that we follow. So in the beginning, we bring together women of different political beliefs and philosophies who are united in their determination to study, make known and help abolish the causes and legitimization of war. So we have several principles that we follow in doing that. We have an integrated approach, so we try to do all these things, maybe not simultaneously. So we're working for total and universal disarmament. We're working for the abolition of violence and coercion in the settlement of conflict. And we wish to substitute that way of settling conflicts with negotiation and conciliation. Another page of aims and principles. We work for the strengthening and the reform of the United Nations system and its decision-making process. We depend very much on international law, because that is where war is often discussed. So we're looking for the development and implementation of international law. We work on women's human rights, that's political, social and economic empowerment. We're looking to encourage solidarity and cooperation amongst all the people to achieve peace. And we're looking to create environmentally sustainable societies. So WILPF is a membership organization, and we have consultative status with the UN. That means we can send observers into United Nations deliberations. We're considered a non-governmental organization by them. They come to us for advice. They will take our information on things. That is a very important part of WILPF's international work. We have sections, as we call them, in 38 different countries on all continents. And in the US, every US state has a WILPF branch. In California's case, we have 13 branches. And the 3 listed there are the ones closest to your catchment area. Peninsula, Palo Alto, San Jose, and Santa Cruz all have branches, very active branches. So we have international, national, and local groups of people working on this effort to get rid of war. And so we are following the edict, think globally, act locally. I hope my talk will convince you we're an organization worth joining. So now let's give you a bit of history. The top picture on the left is the US delegation who sailed across the North Atlantic in 1915, in the height of World War I, to go to an international congress in the Netherlands. And the aim of that congress was to stop World War I. As you know, they were not successful, and more of that later. The lower picture, which I got off the internet, off Twitter, just 3 days ago, are what I consider the descendants of the above women. And they are standing there, they are our current international board of WILPF, and they're standing in Ghana, in West Africa. So my talk will try to recount some of what's happened between 1915 and 2018. So here's a photograph of that Congress that the US delegation took that dangerous voyage across the North Atlantic. And the Congress was in The Hague, the capital of the Netherlands. And there's 1,136 women in that photograph, coming from lots of different countries, cultures, languages, mostly in the northern, I think probably totally in the northern hemisphere. And they were going to study, make known, and eliminate the causes of war. This was what the Congress, which went on for several days, was going to try to do. So they had resolutions that they developed and passed. And they sent out delegations of women, went to most of the countries engaged in that First World War to try to persuade them to stop fighting, but they were not successful. But the more important for us thing was that they actually created the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom during that meeting. And we hold an international congress every 3 years. So the 32nd Triennial Congress just happened in Accra, in West Africa, and it had 200 participants from about 35 countries, now from all continents, not just the Northern Hemisphere. And the theme was building a feminist peace movement. So what does WILPF usually do to try to advocate for peace and freedom? And so our history is on the most left-hand panel over there that you're welcome to look at after my talk. I've just taken a couple of shots from that panel. So the picture on the top is actually a trailer with 6 million petitions, signed petitions, 6 million signed petitions, WILPF branches in 1932, all over the world. We already had branches all over the world in 1932. Signed these disarmament signatures, signed the petition calling for global disarmament. And in the photograph, they're driving these piles of petitions through the streets of Geneva in Switzerland. And then the lower one is they're marching, the last little bit, marching with some of the petitions to the League of Nations, because it wasn't yet the United Nations, it was called the League of Nations then, Disarmament Conference. So marching for peace and getting petitions signed are strategies that WILPF has always used, and we continue to use them. You'll learn later about a petition over there I want you to sign. WILPF also collaborates with other organizations seeking peace and freedom. And you'll recognize Martin Luther King there. He is speaking in that photograph at our 50th anniversary of WILPF. Martin Luther King was a member of WILPF, okay, and that event was in 1965. And so in 1967, 52 of our WILPF branches in the US participated in what was called the Vietnam Summer. Okay, this is the Vietnam War we're talking about. And King had called for 10,000 volunteers to organize and educate the public about the Vietnam War in 500 communities. So 52 of our branches helped to make up some of those 500 communities. The lower picture is from 1968, and these are women from our branch in Palo Alto marching in an anti-Vietnam War march, commonly called the Grandmother's March, because as you can see there are older ladies at the front, which was unusual for anti-Vietnam War marches, those of you who are old enough to remember them. So now I'm going to give you a little bit about the Palo Alto branch, of which I'm a member. Its first meeting was 1922, and it has existed ever since. The first meeting was on the 12th of April. It was convened by 3 women: Alice Park, Jessie Knight Jordan, who was the wife of Stanford's first president, and pacifist Josephine Duveneck, who many of you will know gave us Hidden Villa Ranch in the foothills in Los Altos Hills. So they knew enough women from 5 peace organizations. There were many peace organizations out there, so they brought together 5 women from 5 of those, and they embarked on a campaign they called Disarm the Nursery. And I'd like to point out that many of our branch documents from 1922 onwards are actually in an archive at Stanford University. And so we drew upon that archive for our centennial exhibit, which are the 3 panels over there. The middle panel is the Palo Alto history. And at the end, there will be credits and acknowledgements for these old photographs used, as we are obliged to do. So the beginnings of our Palo Alto, as it was just called then, Palo Alto branch. I'm going to read you a paragraph from a newspaper report. Working for peace, the women questioned congressional candidates on their attitudes towards military appropriations, pushed for disarmament, and signed a statement to the president protesting the unwarranted interference of the United States, one of the most powerful nations in the world, with Nicaragua one of the smallest nations. Now that all sounds very familiar, but this was actually happening in the 1920s. Okay? And this describing the members of the Palo Alto branch and what they were worrying about back then. So here is the top half of a pamphlet that Alice Park wrote about what she said, Disarm the Nursery. It was written in 1922. It was mimeographed and sent all around the world. And it led to a boycott on war toys. And apparently there was a noticeable effect in toy shops that Christmas. Okay? So for example, she writes, you know, military clothes for children. Oops, sorry. No. Oh, I'm going to go backwards. So yeah. Military uniforms for children teach admiration for soldiers' professional clothes. Okay? Military uniforms are planned to be decorative so as to impress people. Their miniature imitations impress the young as well as the old. Girls and boys are even taught the stiff, ungraceful gesture of the military salute. So she says, war is not a pleasant game. War is hideous. There cannot be civilized warfare. And so teaching children that war is a pleasant game is a great mental danger. So she said we need to begin in the nursery, not to have children think that war is a good thing. So she said, banish all war toys, war clothes, war pictures, and war storybooks. And they had a boycott which had an effect, at least in the US. So leaping ahead in Palo Alto's story, we come to atomic bombs, nuclear weapons. So many people were horrified by how destructive the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs were that were dropped on those Japanese towns in 1945. And WILPF immediately started to campaign against weapons of mass destruction. They've been saying ever since they should be outlawed. And of course, this strong stance against nuclear weapons continues until now. And we'll be talking about that later. But this photograph on the right shows two children who live in Palo Alto in the 1950s. And if you recognize yourself, we do want to know who you are. Okay, they're protesting because then in those days they tested the bombs in the atmosphere in islands in the middle of the Pacific. And I'm sure you've all got a mental image of what a nuclear bomb looks like when it goes off in the atmosphere. So even on the island, then the debris comes up in the atmosphere and the winds carry the particulates over to the US mainland. And it became obvious that radioactive strontium-90 was ending up in cow's milk, and so the kids were drinking that milk. So eventually, atomic testing in the atmosphere was stopped, but not for many years. Some more things that our branch has done. On the left, this is our branch member, Esther Newell. In 1983, she's protesting the manufacture of nuclear weapons at Lawrence Livermore Lab. This protest happens these days on August the 6th, which is the day the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. She was arrested here and spent 16 days in jail for resisting arrest. On the picture on the right, some of you will recognize this gentleman. This is Linus Pauling. He and his wife were members of our Palo Alto WILPF. And so the picture is in 1977. Apparently, she inspired his entrance into the peace movement and was very active herself, but they were not jointly awarded the 1962 Peace Prize. And in his speech, he told the Nobel Prize Committee that it was unfortunate that they hadn't included his wife, because she had done a great deal of the same peace work, and she was his inspiration. So the Vietnam War lasted from 1966 to 1973, and WILPF branches all over were very involved against it. Our WILPF branch worked vigorously against this war, and the picture is Margaret Stein, who died just a couple of years ago. She was the president of our branch. She also sat on the National WILPF Board. Remember, we have a local, national, and international structure. She worked with the Stanford University faculty and students who opposed the war, and with young men facing the draft. We actually had people turn up at draft offices and try to persuade young men not to register for the draft. And there's a quote from her: "Almost our entire activity was centered around the war and the draft, always marches and ads in papers." So looking at the archive I mentioned, in 1966, I find the following things that our branch did that year. They had a speakers bureau. They were on the radio with to give their viewpoint. They had 4 public meetings, 5 peace marches, weekly vigils, lots of letter writing to editors and public officials, literature distribution, and they also led an anti-napalm referendum campaign. So all these tactics, of course, are still what activist groups use, except we also use the World Wide Web and email. Those are the 2 things we've added to the strategies. So now let me tell you about another project that was associated with our branch, the Women's Peace Oral History Project. This project was organized by Judy Adams, who's sitting there. She'll wave again. And she began it in 1979 to celebrate WILPF's 70th anniversary. When you're a very old organization, you like to celebrate, at least every 10 years, right? Her project interviewed 90 older women from California and other states' WILPF branches, She engaged students from Stanford and San Jose State, and these volunteers conducted the interviews, and the goal was to preserve the stories of how these women became committed to peace and justice issues and what sustained them over their lifetime of activism. This is a cover of her book, which was published in 1990, with 23 testimonies. And you're very lucky, we have some extra copies down here for sale, a donation between $10 and $20. You can walk away. These are very inspiring stories, I can tell you. So I promised you something about Raging Grannies. Okay, Raging Grannies, their history is in the rightmost panel over here on the table. Okay, so I've just picked out a few things, because lots of things to cover. So the first Raging Grannies group was actually formed in British Columbia in Canada. They were protesting that nuclear submarines were based near their homes, and that was in 1986. They had nothing to do with WILPF, but they saw it was very effective to stand on street corners, a group of women wearing big old hats and aprons like you would wear in the kitchen, and singing protest songs boisterously. This got a lot of attention, and they were independent of WILPF. Now, our Peninsula Raging Grannies started in 2001 because one of our members heard about this group doing this in Canada. She contacted them, and she got their tunes and their lyrics, and the Raging Grannies have been operating under WILPF's umbrella ever since. There are now Raging Granny groups all over the US. There's a Raging Granny songbook, and so let me tell you what the strategy is. So the idea is to turn up uninvited, okay, and sing new songs to familiar tunes that are both hilarious and satirical, okay. There could be a protest song which would, for example, protest the making of war, how our tax dollars are used to buy expensive weapons instead of educating our children. They protest industries polluting our rivers and streams, protest against sexism and racism. But they also sing on behalf of peace, justice, freedom, equality. They sing at anti-war demonstrations where they've been invited, rallies and protests of immigration policy. And our grannies, have been on the same stage as famous people like Joan Baez, for example. And there are lots of photographs on the right-hand panel over here. Here's a couple of them to show you the kind of things they're protesting about. So this picture on the left is outside Walmart in Mountain View, where I'm sure many of you have shopped. No, I don't. I don't shop at Walmart, or maybe none of you do. Bully for you if you don't. But in 2005, a Memorial Day weekend, inside the store, the Marine Corps was showing recruitment videos. Okay, and so our grannies realized this and arranged to turn up uninvited and sing songs against recruitment videos. Okay, the one on the right, the photo on the right, is again outside Walmart on Black Friday. Now you're all familiar with Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, when everybody goes to do their Christmas shopping. Well, here we were asking, again, we were trying to persuade them they didn't really need a lot more stuff, and they certainly didn't need any war toys. Okay, so this issue of no war toys has been going on since 1922. And I think possibly there are fewer war toys available now. My daughter's old enough, and I never bought her any, so I'm not sure what's in the stores right now. So here are the words for 2 Raging Granny songs, and you're going to sing them at the end of my talk, okay? And what we do, so for example, no war toys on the left, you're going to sing to the tune of Jingle Bells, which I'm sure everybody knows. Humanist or not, we all know how to sing Jingle Bells. And on the right, You Are My Sunshine, okay, with new words. We are your grannies, the Raging Grannies, and so on and so forth. And the chorus to Jingle Bells. No war toys underneath the tree. Destructive toys and all war toys are not the toys for me. Okay? So when you've got a bunch of women in funny hats and aprons doing this on street corners, it really does get people's attention. Now, the remainder of my talk, I'm going to talk about the recent activities of my branch of WILPF. Now, WILPF, the US WILPF, actually works on many different issues, probably 10 of them, and we don't have enough people in our group to have somebody working on all of those issues. So our branch decided to focus on just 2 issues, which is low-income housing and homelessness and nuclear weapons. And then recently, because National WILPF asks us to do what they call solidarity events, in solidarity with all the WILPF branches around the country, this year we've been working on the Poor People's Campaign, and I will be telling you more about that. So here's a photograph of our most active members of our branch, and there you are. So Chuck, our one-man member, has arrived recently. He's got his hand up there. So he's not in the picture, but we substituted Helen here, who's not really a member, for him, okay? But here's Judy, who's here, here's me, here's Stephanie. The other people are meetinged out. Our group is so active, they seem every day they're at some meeting or other on some issue. So our low-income housing homeless issues committee, this is not the committee that's my specialty, and Chuck and Stephanie are on that committee and can later answer questions if you have particular questions. And in the 3-ring binder on that table over there, I have put extra information on how we're dealing with these issues, which, as you know, are very much in the news for our area. People who used to, be able to live around here, our service workers can no longer afford. They're having to go down and live in Gilroy and commute to get to tend our gardens or serve our coffee and what have you at places like Pete's Coffee. So how does that committee work? Well, they attend Palo Alto City Council meetings, and Stephanie is at almost every City Council meeting. And what's she doing there? She's pushing for policies that will allow more housing for low-income people to be built, especially in Palo Alto. We don't do this alone. We work in coalition with a variety of housing and homeless advocacy groups and activists. So one of our successes was a few years ago. Some of you who live in Palo Alto will remember this. Palo Alto passed an ordinance which essentially was a ban on sleeping in cars in Palo Alto, okay? And through a lot of work, we got that rescinded. Now we're working on advocating for Palo Alto City to provide safe, clean parking options, because the people are still living in their cars, and we think they would be happier if during the night, when the city's parking lots are not being used, they could actually park there. There's light, and then maybe we would also provide some porta potties for those people. Of course, the issue of the RVs on El Camino is, and now in Mountain View, is another aspect of this whole issue of not enough low-income housing. A lot of those people work at Stanford. You'd think working at Stanford University you'd earn enough money to be able to rent something in Palo Alto or close, but no, that's not the case. So another strategy is we write a lot of letters to our local newspapers. We write to our city councils. So here is a nice success story. Again, it's been in the newspapers. I'm going to imagine that you've heard about this. The Buena Vista Mobile Home Park in Palo Alto. I live half a block from here. This is a picture of one of the streets in Buena Vista, which has trailers and mobile homes. it provided housing for about 400 low-income residents. And in 2013, the family who owned that property said they were going to sell it for millions and millions of dollars to a company who would then build fancy condos, with enormous rents. And we were going to displace, this was kind of the last place really where our low-income residents could live within the city's boundaries. So here's a demonstration going on in 2013 against the mobile home park being closed. A lot of children in this group, and of course they are able to attend Palo Alto Unified School District schools, public schools, which is very good because they get a better education than they would in most other places. And the bottom picture shows you a Palo Alto Council meeting, City Council meeting, during this period where there was a lot of discussion, how were we going to proceed, how could we save this mobile home park. And we worked in coalition with other groups. And eventually, the owners agreed to sell to the Santa Clara County Housing Authority for $40.4 million. Okay? So they made a killing. But we got 400 low-income residents who can still live in Palo Alto, enjoy the education and the other facilities that Palo Alto provides its residents. So the other issue that our branch concentrates on is disarmament, and we have a Disarm Peace Committee, of which me and Judy are on. So as I've mentioned before, total and universal disarmament is one of WILPF's goals. And our international disarmament work is coordinated through a program called Reaching Critical Will. Reaching Critical Will is very well known. It provides a lot of information. It keeps us up to date with what is happening in governments regarding nuclear weapons. And so we're able to use their literature and we follow their lead. So why is disarmament so important for us in WILPF, and why should disarmament be important for you? Well, here's just 3 statistics that will bring this to mind, why you should be worried. So currently in the world there are 15,800 nuclear weapons owned by 9 countries. Okay, that's enough. A small fraction of those weapons, if they were set off, could obliterate civilization. Okay, and most living things in the world. Maybe the cockroaches would survive. Okay, if you look at the global military expenditure, it's $1.7 trillion per year. And the last one is a statistic courtesy of Amnesty International. Every day, at least 1,500 people are killed by armed conflict and armed violence. 1,500 people per day. So, we would like peace, security, justice, and equality. What is impeding reaching those things? And of course, it's the excessive military expenditure, the continuing bombing and shelling of towns and cities. You can't be living in peace and security if you're being bombed out of your houses in Syria. Then the global arms trade, of which the US takes a lot of part, is poorly regulated and irresponsible. So why are there so many? These are other weapons, not just the nuclear weapons. There's other weapons that we could well do without. And so then finally the nuclear bombs owned by 9 nations. So of course what we'd like to happen is to reduce the military spending and use that money on human needs instead. So currently $1.4 trillion has been promised over the next 30 years to modernize our aging nuclear weapons. Imagine how much healthcare, improved highways, schools could be improved for $1.4 trillion. So this is a nice little cartoon, a conversion machines taking all the military stuff this worker is turning the crank and we're getting housing and better schools and better highways out. So what are the reasons for abolishing nuclear weapons? Well, there are 4 different groups of reasons. I'm just going to name them here. You can find a sheet in the 3-ring binder which briefly explains each of these reasons. There's humanitarian reasons, security reasons, economic reasons, and environmental reasons why we want to get rid of nuclear weapons. Because even though we're not actually blowing anybody up, and we haven't since 1945, which many experts say was just sheer good luck, that we haven't actually had one go off accidentally. The waste that's to actually make the weapons, you have to mine the uranium, then you have to process the uranium and what have you to get down to a particular type of uranium that only one style of uranium can be worked in a bomb. That leaves a lot of waste, and these waste piles are hanging around the US and other parts of the world and leaking into groundwater and causing trouble for people who are living near them. So that's why nuclear disarmament, is necessary for the environment, not just for not setting them off and killing people. So this URL here tells you where you can find these arguments. And again, I printed it out. It's in that 3-ring binder for you just to glance at. So what are our strategies for advocating for nuclear disarmament? So the WILPF International has been working with governments and the processes of the United Nations for decades. And that has resulted in the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Okay, the UN has said we're going to prohibit them. And it was adopted by 122 nations last July. And when 50 nations have ratified it, and we've got 14 so far, it will become international law. Then it will be illegal to own or make or help other people make nuclear weapons. And the US will be against international law. So we're educating people like you about the scourge of nuclear weapons. We do lectures, we have films, we demonstrate, as you'll see shortly. And so cooperation between governments is actually the only way that this is going to happen. We're not advocating unilateral disarmament, we're advocating that people from different governments, because that's happened in the past. If you look back in the 1970s, there were a lot more nuclear weapons in the world during the Cold War, and we've actually got rid of quite a lot of them. So it can be done. They can be dismantled and destroyed. It's not technically difficult. It's just conceptually difficult, apparently. So if I've convinced you that nuclear weapons are not a good thing, I'm now going to tell you what you can do today to help ban nuclear weapons, right? First, you can sign the petition that we have on the table over there, where in the US it's our Senate that has to ratify treaties, and they're very slow at ratifying international treaties. So this one, of course, they're not going to ratify it yet, but we nevertheless want them to understand the public wants them to ratify this treaty. And once you've signed and ratified the treaty, you actually have to get rid of your nuclear weapons. That's part of the deal. Now, there are 2 related California Assembly joint resolutions that just this last week are going through the California Assembly and Senate, and they will be voted on by the California Senate tomorrow. Okay? So we want you to write to your state senator today and ask them to vote aye on these 2 resolutions. And Judy has a few sheets of paper there with how to find your state representative. I've found the 3 closest ones. State District 10, 13, and 15 are very close to here. and I've listed the name of your state senator, and they're all he and his, all their Sacramento phone numbers. So when you get home, we'd like you, and I'm going to circulate this so you can write down the pertinent information on those blue pieces of paper that were on your chairs. So the Assembly has already passed these resolutions. The resolutions say to, from the California state legislators, say to the President and the Senate, please, we want you to agree to this UN treaty. And the second one is about no first use. So it used to be that the US said, we vow we will never be the ones to first set off a nuclear weapon. Okay? We will only set off a nuclear weapon if somebody attacks us or one of our allies. And just recently, President Trump changed that. He said, I don't like that. You know, he doesn't like a lot of things. And so he removed that vow to the rest of the world. We may, if he feels like it, when he wakes up at 5 a.m. one morning, we may set off a nuclear weapon first. So that's the second resolution, and you can read about them on the sheets there. Another thing you can do after the meeting, you can ask any of our branch members here about Mayors for Peace. Mayors for Peace is an international group of 7,632 cities who collectively are urging the world to abolish nuclear weapons. It's called Mayors for Peace. Started in Japan, as you might imagine. And East Palo Alto is a member. Menlo Park is a member. Santa Cruz is a member. San Francisco, many places around here. Palo Alto is not. Okay, used to be. We had a mayor who said, "Oh, I don't like this. I'm going to take us out." So, Mayors for Peace is another advocating organ for getting the public to say we don't want nuclear weapons. There's information on Mayors for Peace in the 3-ring binder over here, and we can direct you to that. So the last thing we've been doing recently is a new Poor People's Campaign. Those of you old enough will remember that Martin Luther King had a Poor People's Campaign 50 years ago. So this new one, and this is our banner, which you can see over here. The banner says, "Uniting to end poverty, end racism, end militarism, and end ecological devastation." So there's 100 organizations, over 100 organizations, including WILPF, are working on this new Poor People's Campaign. And so we're trying to help the people who are struggling with these interconnected evils. These evils are all interconnected. And you may not be suffering from persistent poverty or systemic racism, but I think you are suffering from increased militarism and ecological devastation. So it's called the Poor People's Campaign. We're all poor by this definition. So who started this? Well, 2 pastors called a national call for moral revival in order to resume the war on poverty, which was never won. Okay? Now, their morality, although they're pastors, does not depend on religion. Okay? It's framed as a much larger concept, encompasses us all. We can all be moral without having to be religious, and it's an obligation each of us owes to everybody else. So these 2 pastors then have been going around the country trying to engage people in understanding that we are not better off than we were 50 years ago, and we need to end these evils of poverty, racism, militarism, and ecological devastation. And they had a public policy institute do a statistical study of the current status of Americans as far as their lives, statistically, and they showed that the lives of poor Americans, women and blacks in the US has not improved. It's got worse in the 50 years since Martin Luther King's first campaign. And again, in the 3-ring binder over here, more information, some of those statistics that will blow you away. So the campaign started with 6 weeks of action across these dates not that long ago. But the 6 weeks of action was just the beginning of a movement. Okay, the movement, they're looking to shift the moral narrative of the nation and transform the political, economic and moral structures of our country. Again, a very big goal. So for example, week 2 of the 6 weeks of action, we concentrated on systemic racism and voter suppression, okay, and considered the interlocking injustices of the prison industrial complex, unjust immigration policy, racist voter suppression laws, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and the mistreatment of indigenous peoples. So these are all things that haven't gotten better, and the Poor People's Campaign is going to be going forward to have, they're looking for policies at the state level, they're looking for new laws, and one of, voter suppression, one of the things is to get more people out to the elections in November. So our branch members have been demonstrating every Friday, during that 6 weeks, every Friday, corner of El Camino Real in Embarcadero in Palo Alto. You might know it as the Town and Country Village shopping center. So here's a couple of pictures of our group and like-minded folks who join us on this corner with our banner here, which you see over here, and signs about a variety of issues. This is a very busy intersection. Literally thousands of cars pass us in that 1 hour, and we get a lot of friendly honks, occasionally some not friendly honks, mostly friendly honks, and they so we did this during the 6 weeks of the PPC action, and now we are continuing them. So everybody is welcome to come. Corner of El Camino and Embarcadero in Palo Alto every Friday, noon till 1 o'clock. This is just across from Palo Alto High School, so when the high school kids come to get their lunch, we can talk to them, we talk to people walking into Stanford. It's an excellent place for educating the public. Here's some other ways we educate the public, our branch. We had, for example, a tax day in 2017. This is in the City Hall. We set up our information table and told people that really, their taxes should go to, not to military expenditures, but to helping people. Then here is an Earth Day event. We talked about ecological devastation. And just in June, we had a booth at the Juneteenth celebration of East Palo Alto, where we talked mostly to our East Palo Alto neighbors about WILPF and our efforts to help end racism. So if you join the group, we can promise you lots of opportunities to stand outside and talk to people. Okay, if that's the kind of thing you like to do, to engage other people. People are usually very friendly. So if you're thinking, well, how effective is WILPF? I just want to list for you the Nobel Peace Prize winners who are associated with WILPF. First, our 2 co-founders won the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1931, Jane Addams, 1946, Emily Green Balch. Linus Pauling, who I pointed out is a member of WILPF in Palo Alto, he won it in 1962. Martin Luther King, also a member of WILPF, he won it in 1964. And just last year, much to our delight, this campaign called the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which is an enormous organization of which WILPF is a very important member. They're the organization who got that UN treaty to be actually adopted. Okay, and they were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for this work. Of course, again, this has taken decades to get this far. So just to go back to the fact that this is a somewhat historical presentation, I have two photographs here. These was the leadership table at The Hague in 1915, okay? And they are wearing the kind of hats that our Raging Grannies wear. But that's what the kind of hats they used to wear in those days. This photograph below is our new international board, who were elected 5 days ago. And you can see, just looking at them, they come from probably 5 or 6 different countries, different continents. This is our new president. She's from Nigeria in West Africa. And so a lot of things have changed from 1915 to 2018, but I think in a good way. So my concluding words, why won't you join us, okay? So just to remind you, our organization urges people everywhere to understand, take action, and exercise your own power to build the foundations of peace and freedom. And we are looking for changes in public opinion, we're looking for changes in the narrative on violence, and of course public opinion and actions are critical to trying to bring a peace to the world. So we call on everybody, especially women committed to our aims and principles that I listed at the beginning, to join us and become members. Men are welcome to join too. Here is our email address. Down here in front of me, there are membership brochures. Over there is a sign-in sheet. If you're not sure you want to join, but you'd like to talk to us some more, you can leave your name and email address over there. Here I've mentioned a lot of organizations. Here are the websites of all of them. Again, this sheet is in the 3-ring binder, so if you've particularly thought about, I'd like to know more about reaching critical will, you can go look up their website address. This is our own Facebook account. If you should be on Facebook, we post a lot of stuff that we're doing on a Facebook website. So now I have to do this because this film is being filmed and my talk will be put on the internet. We have to be very careful about some of those old photographs that we used, because they come from places like the Library of Congress. They come from Swarthmore College Peace Collection, and we had to get permission to use them in our exhibit. And now I'm telling you, permission was granted. So when this video recording of my talk is put on the internet, people who watch that can see that we got permission to use these photographs. That's page 1 of 3. Here's page 2 of 3. And this is the archive at Stanford. I mentioned the Stanford Archive of Recorded Sound. Believe it or not, recorded sound has a lot of documents.
Plus digitized.
And digitized.
The women's interviews.
Interviews, right. So those, the women who were interviewed for this book, their interviews were recorded at the time in the 1970s. They've now been digitized. That's why, and they put in a lot of other documents. So the minutes from our very first meeting are in this archive, and that's how I was able to find out what they were doing.
You're running a little over.
Oh, we go. Here we go.
Time for a Q&A.
Yes, yes. This is my acknowledgements. I'm trying to keep to the code of law here on use of old photographs. Okay. Some more here. Most of the photos were taken by me, the ones that aren't mentioned here. And every effort has been made to trace copyright ownership and obtain permission for images in this recorded talk. Okay. Just lastly, volunteering with WILPF is also fun. Okay. So just a couple of photos from our Congress that just finished in Ghana. So this is the Cameroon delegation who are dancing at the beginning of the Congress. And here are very happy-looking delegates voting during the Congress. So I took these photographs from Twitter. People were tweeting. Lastly, if you're itching for another march, we've been a lot of marches. There's a big one on the 8th of September in San Francisco. It's called Rise for Climate, Jobs and Justice. But there will be a no nukes, no wars, no warming contingent who will be marching behind a banner that looks like this. You get to Embarcadero Plaza at 10 a.m. on Saturday, September the 8th, and you can join a contingent of people who are particularly marching for nuclear abolition. And this banner will be there, and probably some WILPF signs. So lots of things you can do when you join WILPF. Thank you very much.
Anyone with questions, raise your hand and I'll pass the mic around.
Oh,
Yeah, hello. Huh?
Is it on?
yes?
Yeah.
Hold it close to your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. How can we arrange that Trump is listening to you?
Well, right, if signing our petition over there is one reason.
Yeah.
We have, there are actually, experts on North Korea at Stanford University who've written about the fact that denuclearization will take a long time, and it's not something you're going to do overnight and what have you. So we have to get to other people in his party, I think. Trying to reach him himself doesn't work. Judy, what were you going to say?
I was saying, use Twitter.
Twitter, yes. Yeah.
Would you tell us what the problem is in Palo Alto getting mayors for peace? You've been working on it. What's happening and why hasn't it been approved?
Right, well, as I said, Palo Alto joined this Mayors for Peace advocacy organization soon after it was formed in 1985. We had a mayor in 2013 who misunderstood what Mayors for Peace was asking. He thought it was asking that the US unilaterally disarm from nuclear weapons. And so he, on his own, without consulting with the city council, took us out of Mayors for Peace. So we're now trying to get Palo Alto to rejoin this organization for Mayors for Peace. Along the way, we've got Menlo Park and East Palo Alto have both joined in the last 2 months. And I found out that we have, every city has sister cities. We have 8 sister cities in different parts of the world. 4 of our sister cities actually belong to Mayors for Peace. So I'm trying to embarrass our current city council into rejoining Mayors for Peace. Okay, there's a gentleman. Oh, yes.
Could you talk a little about the what happened with the conference for the Versailles Treaty and why your organization didn't attend and led to the creation of WILPF?
Sorry, the very first Congress? You want me to talk about the very first Congress where WILPF was founded in 1915?
I want you to talk about why it was founded and who was excluded from the Versailles Conference that caused WILPF to not attend and be created.
Okay. The Versailles Conference, you obviously know more details than I do. We had delegations that went out to try to persuade people not to continue fighting. Remind me what the Versailles Conference was. Was World War I. It was the one that ended World War I. So I don't know, well, why would an organization be invited to such a conference? Judy, do you have an idea?
Well, I think because of the delegations.
I think because of the delegations that were already there in Europe from different countries, including the U.S., that delegates tried to lobby for the nations who should have been included in the Versailles Treaty. But also out of that International Conference of WILPF in 1915, President Wilson took their main principles into his 12-point peace plan that he announced, which would have offered more protection for the victims of violence in the war and legal principles that would have made the treaty more accommodating to the losses of the causes of the war. So I think that's direct and indirect attempt to make a more inclusive treaty and a more peaceful treaty.
Mm-hmm.
War, at the ends of wars, a lot of people suffer who were not soldiers. You know, a lot of nations were bankrupted, and people believe that that certainly contributed to the next war. So one has to keep vigilant. I think that's the best I could say, with my knowledge.
Okay.
I also have a question. What are you doing to end our longest war, the 14 years in Afghanistan? Are you doing anything to end that?
I can tell you that at this conference in Ghana, we inducted 5 new countries as members of the International WILPF, and Afghanistan is one of those 5 new countries. So we now have an active WILPF branch section in Afghanistan who will be trying to influence the what's going on there. And so, but unless women are invited or manage to get into those peace talks or the discussions, then, you know, that's what we're saying. We're saying more women need to be into those discussions to help cease these wars. I don't know all, I mean, as I say, there are thousands of members throughout the world of WILPF, and there's our big international NGO in Geneva, and we have a branch in the near the United Nations in New York. I can't speak to all the things they're doing, but you can go to the website and find out.
Thucydides said something to the effect.
Who said?
Thucydides, the Greek philosopher, that money is a cause of war. Now we owe today all of our prosperity to Adolf and Uncle Joe. Peace would destroy our economy. I'm thinking of reporting you to our President Donald Trump that you are a terrorist organization. You're destroying the economy.
We believe that there are many peaceful economies that can generate prosperity in the US and already have. I mean, the kind of things, a lot of the things that are done in Silicon Valley, as you know, are usually used for not military purposes, although as we find out more about what's happening with Facebook and Google, some of it is, but many of us enjoy the programs that those companies have generated for us. And prosperity, and one of the reasons for the lack of low-income housing is because of these very prosperous companies, and they're even though we hear of Google engineers who can't afford to rent a house in our area. So,
where's your patriotism? We need the military to keep us alive.
okay. Yeah, we believe that it doesn't have to be that way. Yes. Oh.
I'd like to respond to the previous speaker. This country's military is, I forget the factor, it's larger than the next 11 military powers. The idea that we need 1 cent for military things is purely propaganda, rabble-rousing, feeding a base that would like to hear that, would like to hear some masculine, macho rhetoric, but it's not true. The idea that the United States needs any more money to dominate the world is not looking at the picture. We're dominating the world just fine with the military we've got. We really don't need any more.
Thank you. Right. So we're moving towards, I'm going to have you sing No War Tours to Jingle Bells very soon.
Well, time's up for Q&A, actually. It's 12:15.
Yes.
And
so can I now encourage you, looking at the words here, you can all be Raging Grannies for a few seconds.
Can it be enlarged a little bit? Where's our technical?
Okay. No, wait, Stephanie. They want me to make this bigger. But then you're not going to be... Yeah, but it's not going to... oh, God.
Where's the bouncing ball?
Just go back to showing this slide.
I know, I'm sorry, I can't... So... Now, you all know the tune of Jingle Bells.
Yes.
Where was
We
it?
could have someone call out the words, and we would sing, and then call out the next line.
Okay, here we are.
You feel comfortable doing that? No, you've got it, but it's smaller.
I know. Well, I'm sorry, this is as big as I can get. All right, okay. Jingle Bells. Those of you who can remember Jingle Bells. Chuck, can you remember? Stephanie will help. Okay.
So you're going to speak the line, and then we'll sing it.
Oh, well, no.
We're just going to sing it.
We're just going to sing it. If you can't read it, come closer. All right.
Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Dashing through the stores on a Christmas shopping spree. Toys bells are so high, as far as I can see. I hope that I can find some peaceful toys for me, so kids can learn to play in peaceful harmony. No more wars, no war toys underneath the tree. Destructive games and all war toys are not the toys for me. Thank you.